We're reading A Course in Miracles, chapter 15, and this chapter is the Holy Instant. And it's not the Holy Instant, it's called the Holy Instant. And we're on section 10, which is the time of rebirth. It is in your power, in time, to delay the perfect union of the Father and the Son. For in this world, the attraction of guilt does stand between them. Neither time nor season means anything in eternity. But here it is the Holy Spirit's function to use them both, though not as the ego uses them. This is the season when you would celebrate my birth into the world. Yet you know not how to do it. Let the Holy Spirit teach you, and let me celebrate your birth through him. The only gift I can accept of you is the gift I gave to you. Release me as I choose your own release. The time of Christ we celebrate together, for it has no meaning if we are apart. The holy instant is truly the time of Christ, for in this liberating instant no guilt is laid upon the Son of God, and his unlimited power is thus restored to him. What other gift can you offer me when only this I choose to offer you? And to see me is to see me in everyone and offer everyone the gift you offer me. If I am as incapable of receiving sacrifice as God is, and every sacrifice you ask of yourself, you ask of me. Learn now that sacrifice of any kind is nothing but a limitation imposed on giving, and by this limitation you have limited acceptance of the gift I offer you. We who are one cannot give separately. When you are willing to accept our relationship as real, guilt will hold no attraction for you. For in our union you will accept all of your brothers. The gift of union is the only gift that I was born to give. Give it to me that you may have it. The time of Christ is the time appointed for the gift of freedom offered to everyone. And by your acceptance of it, you offer it to everyone. It is in your power to make this season holy, for it is in your power to make the time of Christ be now. It is possible to do this all at once because there is but one shift in perception that is necessary for you made but one mistake. It seems like many, but it is all the same. For though the ego takes many forms, it is always the same idea. What is not love is always fear and nothing else. It is not necessary to follow fear through all the circuitous routes by which it burrows underground and hides in darkness, to emerge in forms quite different from what it is. Yet it is necessary to examine each one as long as you would retain the principle that governs all of them. When you are willing to regard them not as separate, but as different manifestations of the same idea, and one you do not want, they go together. The idea is simply this. You believe it is possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. This is the choice you think you have, and the decision you believe that you must make. You see no other alternatives, for you cannot accept the fact that sacrifice gets nothing. Sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that salvation apart from sacrifice means nothing to you. Your confusion of sacrifice and love is so profound that you cannot conceive of love without sacrifice. And it is this that you must look upon. Sacrifice is attack, not love. If you would accept but this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. For if there is sacrifice, someone must pay and someone must get. And the only question that remains is how much is the price and for getting what? As host to the ego, you believe that you can give all your guilt away whenever you want and thereby purchase peace. And the payment does not seem to be yours. While it is obvious that the ego does demand payment, it never seems to be demanding it of you. You are unwilling to recognize that the ego, which you invited, is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. The ego will never let you perceive this, since this recognition would make it homeless. For when the recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Each form will be recognized as but a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all. That love demands that love demands sacrifice and is therefore inseparable from attack and fear, and that guilt is the price of love, which must be paid by fear. How fearful then has God become to you, and how great a sacrifice do you believe his love demands? For total love would demand total sacrifice. And so the ego seems to demand less of you than God, and of the two is judged as the lesser of two evils, one to be feared a little, perhaps, but the other to be destroyed. For you see love as destructive, and your only question is, who is to be destroyed, you or another? You seek to answer this question in your special relationships, in which you seem to be both destroyer and destroyed in part, but able to be neither completely. And this you think saves you from God, whose total love would completely destroy you. You think that everyone outside yourself demands your sacrifice, but you do not see that only you demand sacrifice, and only of yourself. Yet the demand of sacrifice is so savage and so fearful that you cannot accept it where it is. The real price of not accepting this has been so great that you have given God away rather than look at it. For if God would demand total sacrifice of you, it seems safer to project him outward and away from you and not be host to him. To him you ascribed the ego's treachery, inviting it to take his place to protect you from him. And you do not recognize that it is what you invited in that would destroy you and does demand total sacrifice of you. No partial sacrifice will appease this savage guest, for it is an invader who but seems to offer kindness, but always to make the sacrifice complete. You will not succeed in being partial hostage to the ego, for it keeps no bargains and would leave you nothing. Nor can you be partial host to it. You must choose between total freedom and total bondage, for there are no alternatives but these. You have tried many compromises in the attempt to avoid recognizing the one decision you must make. And yet it is the recognition of the decision, just as it is, that makes the decision so easy. Salvation is simple, being of God, and therefore very easy to understand. Do not try to project it from you and see it outside yourself. In you are both the question and the answer, the demand for sacrifice and the peace of God. Okay, the time of rebirth. This section is called the time of rebirth. Now, this was when this was happening. This was coming through Helen at the time of Christmas, right? And what do we celebrate at the time of Christmas? Obviously, we celebrate the birth of Jesus. I don't think anyone really knows when Jesus was born. We have the winter solstice, right, on the 22nd, and then 3 days later is the risen sun, right? So it makes sense that it will be on December 25th, right? For that reason. But let's leave that aside because that's not really important here. We're talking about the rebirth of Christ in you. Christ, but the thing is that Christ is already reborn. Christ is eternal. Christ does not need to be born. Christ never was born and never died. That's the message. Christ is eternal, the Christ principle. And really what we're talking about has no names. You can even forget the word Christ. You can forget the word love. You can forget the word God. You can forget all these terms because they're all dualistic. Ultimately, none of that matters. This is a transcendence. The Course is pointing to a transcendence of all names, forms, constructs, concepts. It's taking us beyond the ego-conditioned mind, right? And how conditioned is our ego? Well, Jesus makes statements such as, your confusion of sacrifice and love is so profound that you could not conceive of love without sacrifice. We're very conditioned to this idea of sacrifice. We'll have to talk about that in a moment. Now, Jesus has said in the Course other things similar to this, like he says, you could not think of God, you're so conditioned to think of God as having a body that you cannot, it's very difficult to think, for us to even think of God without a body, right? We anthropomorphize God all the time. when we were kids, a lot of us had this idea of God is this old man in the sky, the great granddaddy or something, that watches over everyone and, takes notes on who's naughty and nice and all those other things, kind of like a great Santa Claus type figure, right? Anyway, my point is that Jesus makes statements like this. He's saying, you can't even think of God without a body. You can't even think of love without sacrifice, because you are so conditioned. You've invited the ego in as your host, but you're really hostage to the ego. But you've invited the ego in as your host, and God is pushed out. You've basically thrown God away. You've said, I don't need no God. Let's just go through this a little bit. This is so lovely what Jesus says here at the beginning. It is in your power, in time, to delay the perfect union of the Father and the Son. So this is a carryover from the last section where where Jesus said, having the power of God and choosing the ego, that is a very powerful combination. We have invited the ego in, and with the power of God, we are able to push God out of the picture. That's powerful. It's foolproof, but not God-proof. The attraction of God is the attraction of love for love, as Jesus puts it, or the attraction for God is stronger than that, right? Because we will always default to what we really are. We are God. We are love. We are the Christ. So we can't but find our way back there. There's no way in hell or heaven that we cannot get back there. For in this world, the attraction of guilt does stand between them. Neither time nor season means anything in eternity. But here it is the Holy Spirit's function to use them both, though not as the ego uses them. This is a season when you would celebrate my birth into the world. So Jesus is talking about, in the first person, about himself and about Christmas, right? This is Christmas time, and at this time of the year, you would celebrate my birth, yet you know not how to do it. You don't really know how to celebrate Jesus' birth. Let the Holy Spirit teach you, and let me celebrate your birth through him. So Jesus wants to celebrate our birth, because it's the same thing, right? His birth and our birth are the same, one and the same. And Jesus is trying to point that out, that when we see our brother as one and the same as us, and what we wish for them, we wish for ourselves, we're getting closer, right? We're seeing as the Holy Spirit sees, and we're seeing as Jesus sees. When we want for our brother and our sister and all others the same as what we want for ourselves, in the highest sense, then the rebirth of Christ is at hand. The only gift I can accept of you is the gift I gave to you. Right? So Jesus doesn't want no presents for his birthday. Right? He doesn't want any presents from us. He wants presents, with a C. P-R-E-N, P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E. He wants the holy presence, right? Release me as I choose your own release. The time of Christ we celebrate together, for it has no meaning if we are apart. So, Christ's birthday is our birthday. We are all born in this saving message that Jesus is presenting. The holy instant is truly the time of Christ. So the time of Christ, Christ does not really have a birthday, right? That's just for us. The holy instant is the time of Christ. What is the holy instant? The holy instant is eternity, is the experience of eternity, which means Christ was never born, never died, and neither did we. Now, our way of giving is, we think that when we give a gift, we lose something, right? That's how the ego's conditioning, the ego's thought system is. When I give something to someone else, I lose it. So if I give a gift, I'm out some money for that gift. Damn. Like when I give, a kind word, there may still be some egoic conditioning behind that, right? Like, I am going to get something personally from this. But Jesus is saying there is no separate personhood, really. It's all one. It's really just accepting the fact that whatever you give, you get back. It's not even that you get it back. It's one and the same. Giving and receiving are one and the same. So if I give the gift of love and seeing my brother whole and seeing my brother perfect, I get that same. It comes right back to me. Right? It doesn't make me a better person to do that, actually. Like, it's not anything added. I don't get any brownie points. It's really more of an acceptance of what we are. We are love, we are perfect, we are whole. That's just an acceptance of what we are. Now, when I give judgment, when I give misunderstanding, hatred, anger, basically they're all forms of judgment and they're all forms of fear, I get that back. Comes right back to me. And that is just a misidentification or a mistaken ignorance. It's coming from the ignorance of our true nature. It's not a sin, it's just a mistake that can be corrected, and Jesus is trying to help us to correct it. Now, Jesus says a lot of interesting things here. Let's just mention that the idea is simply this: you believe it is possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. Now, Jesus has said this twice before. He has asked us, would you rather be host to God or hostage to the ego? Now he's saying something a little different. He's saying, you think that alternative is even possible. It's not. It's not even a possible choice. It's a false dichotomy. Because why? Because the ego is nothing, right? It's not even possible to be hostage to the ego. But it's also not possible to be hostage in the sense that the ego can come and take you hostage. Why? Because we invite the ego in. We don't realize that the ego is our hostage, right? We have invited the ego as our guest. And by inviting the ego, we've pushed God, our host, our heavenly host, out of the picture. So it's not possible to be hostage to the ego. That is our choice. And part, a very big part of what Jesus is doing in the Course is to help us to realize that everything is our decision. Everything is up to us. Everything is what we decide. Ultimately, though, there's nothing to decide because there's only one reality. So free will is not real ultimately. Just as everything is not real except God, right? So, but from where we are, we do have a choice. It is in your power to make the season holy, for it is in your power to make the time of Christ be now. It is possible to do this all at once because there is but one shift in perception that is necessary for you made but one mistake. It seems like many, but it is all the same. For though the ego takes many forms, it is always the same idea. What is love What is not love is always fear and nothing else. Let's leave this section with this line. What is not love is fear and nothing else. There's only these two things, love and fear. The ego is a fear-based thought system. It's a thought system based in separation, which by its very nature is fearful, based in fear. So there's really only two things, right? In terms of the decision that we have to make, there's fear and there's love. Now, it's very difficult for any of us to give up fear all at once. We do it gradually over time, little by little, until we get to the point where we realize, oh, no fear is necessary whatsoever, and fear doesn't even exist, just as the ego doesn't exist. And we realize it's all love. And it's always been that. It's just, we invited the ego in as our host. We hosted the ego. We're not hostage to the ego. We decided to do that, and we can undecide that. All right, let's leave it at that, because I could keep rambling on. Christmas as the end of sacrifice is the next section. One of my favorite sections, because I used this in a song that I did, and I'll tell you about it next time. Thank you. See you soon.